Fans, welcome out. This is Joe Iacono with GoBlackKnights.com. I've got with me from Deacon Illustrated, Conor O'Neill. How you doing tonight, Conor?
Doing well, Joe. Getting ready for a game that hopefully won't feature 126 points.
I know. I don't think either team or either coaching staff wants to see that again. Guess if you're a fan of offense, it was awesome. I understand you just came from the Wake Forest basketball practice, so a little more like basketball than football last year, I think.
Yeah, I was double checking because I also covered Duke, and I saw the Duke Army game this year when Army came to Cameron, and that score was 82-56. So Army had the
Yeah.
same number of points in football as they did
As
in
they did in
basketball when I saw
basketball.
them.
Not much difference there.
Perfect.
Exactly. I remember one sequence in the third quarter where I think Wake had a one play touchdown drive. Army got the ball back, one play touchdown drive. Wake got the ball back. I believe it was 3 drives in a row, one play.
Just what a I mean, I wasn't even there. I was just watching it here from home, and I had a wedding to go to that night, about 20 minutes away. And I was thinking noon game. Army runs the ball and plays fast games. I think I had to be in Greensboro at the wedding by like 5:30 or 6 o'clock, and I was thinking, you know, I'll get on the post game, hear some quotes, be able to not fully digest the game and write about it, but get a decent sized story going. And you know, by the fourth quarter, I'm taking commercial breaks to throw on my shirts and taking a commercial break to run downstairs and make sure I got my teeth brushed and everything. And I'm like, I needed to be ready to go as soon as the horn ended there to run out the door and make a wedding.
Oh, exactly. Most Army games I cover, I'm done with the post game presser and have my post game article wrapped up by about 4 p.m. But that day, I think it was 5:30 by the time we got done. So
Yeah.
it was crazy. I mean, usually most games, if Army scores over 30, they're typically going to win or at least have a shot. And vice versa. If we give up 70, you expect an absolute beatdown. But if it were not for a pick six on a fake field goal and I think a fumble in the fourth quarter that Wake recovered deep in your territory, might have been a different story at the end of the game.
Yeah, I mean, Dave Clawson was pretty out forthcoming about that since really the end of the game last year, saying that the pick six, if not for that, then it just would have kept going back and forth, score and score and score. And if Army has the ball in the last minute and they score a touchdown, they're going to go for two. And
Right.
that day, getting 3 yards against Wake's defense was no tall task.
I think they could have put me at B back and I had a shot at getting three.
Right, right. So yeah, I mean that if not for that pick six, that was not even that safety's cover. That was not his man. I don't
Oh
know if I'm
wow.
rubbing salt in the wound or not, but that was
Yeah.
just a sixth-year safety who's played a lot of football, who saw somebody leaking out of the corner of his eye and drifted over and made a play. And
Nice.
that's what happens when you can get some really experienced football players. And that's what COVID is. That's kind of the luxury that COVID has given Wake.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because yeah, that's kind of one more between that and the transfer portal. Army's been put at even more of a disadvantage the last couple of years because all our kids, most of them, unless there's an injury or an academic issue, they all have to be out the door in 48 months. So
Yep.
yeah. So anyway, moving, kind of turning the page to this year's game. Wake looks better, and which is hard to believe. I mean, you guys had a great season last year, and unfortunately, I think so far it's looking like Army may be in a bit of a rebuilding season, especially on defense. So a lot of the Army faithful are just hoping Army can keep it close. I think this weekend, kind of starting off. Obviously your offense has always been super powerful, but I noticed the Wake defense this year against the run specifically has done really, really well. I think they're averaging giving up 3.6 or 3.8 yards a carry. So a lot of improvements on that side of the ball. What do you attribute most of the improvements on the defensive side of the ball to?
First, you got to look at Brad Lambert coming in as defensive coordinator. That was a move that, even in 11-win season last year, we had, or at least I had some questions of whether Lyle Hemphill would return in the same capacity at defensive coordinator. And he kind of made the decision easy for Dave Clawson. He left and went to Duke. He coached with Mike Elko back, I think, more than 10 years ago now.
Okay.
So he landed there as the safeties coach, and that opened the door for Clawson to not have to make that decision.
Right.
And so Clawson brought in Brad Lambert, which is kind of, it's weird down here in North Carolina. We have two situations like that this year where not the same coach hires a defensive coordinator who was at the school previously under a different coach. Like Brad Lambert was here under Jim Grobe for about 10 years. Down the road at UNC, you had Gene Chizik hired by Mac Brown, and he was with Larry Fedora for a couple of years.
Right.
Lambert is, he's a football lifer. He left Wake Forest to start Charlotte's football program from scratch, and is kind of, he probably got moved out a year early. Like he got it off the ground and running, and then Will Healy came in and got them to a bowl game.
Yeah.
And it's probably much more information than you and your listeners would need, but
no, that's good stuff. That's I kind of geek out on football history and especially coordinators and assistant coaches, right? We have something in common. Our former DC just got let go at UNC last year, Jay Bateman. And I feel like the same thing with his defense. Had they given him another year or two, I feel like his development might have really helped the system and kind of helped them move along a little better. They gave up so many points in that bowl game last year. It was kind of like, I think Mac Brown was just looking to roll some heads. So
yeah, and if you look at Carolina's defense this year, it doesn't seem like that coordinator change has paid
not any
off.
better. No.
Yeah, Wake's, to speak to the run defense, it's not, I don't think you would call it good, but it is improved. Like you're seeing less misfits. The Clemson game was really the big test there. And, you look at the Clemson final score and you say 51 points. Oh man, the defense is just where they were last year, but they gave up 38 in regulation.
Right. Yeah.
They gave up a big 53-yard run to Will Shipley on Clemson's first snap. And then the rest of the game, he had, I think, 19 carries for 51 yards.
Oh, wow.
So
nice.
You're shutting him down other than that one big run. You just, I went into that game, me and a couple people saying, if you're Wake's defense, you load the box, you gear up to stop the run. And if DJU throws for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns and beats you, then you tip your cap. And
right, exactly.
He threw for like 370 and 5 touchdowns.
Offense is, if you could stop the run against Clemson, you can hang with them usually. So
yeah, so DJ beat him in that game. It was not as bad of a defensive performance as the scoreboard indicates.
Right. Well, double OT, right? There's 2 extra touchdowns thrown in there. Yep. So giving up 38 to Clemson, while their offense isn't exactly Alabama's offense, they're still solid. So
yeah, and I think the rest of the season is going to prove that DJ is a lot better than he was last year.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think Clemson's all the way back now. That's my opinion, but
yeah, I would agree that they're in the driver's seat in the Atlantic Division here in the ACC. It's kind of I don't know if solemn is the right word, but that's kind of what comes to mind with, Clemson has beaten now the 2 contenders in that division in the last 2 weeks. And you look around and maybe Florida State can give them the game, but this Florida State team that Wake beat last week, Clemson's defensive line is going to eat them alive.
Yeah.
So maybe Syracuse, if they get the right pieces involved and get
Syracuse could, and they're a team, right? They're a team that's given Dabo problems in the past. So is that game down in Clemson or up in the Carrier Dome?
I think it's at Clemson this year.
Okay. Yeah, so advantage Clemson, but
Yep.
you never know in that one. That could get hairy.
Yep.
They played. I thought Clemson played NC State better than I thought they were gonna, but yeah. Anyway, no, and Wake came back really good game against Florida State. Obviously, held them to 21 points. I got to see a good chunk of that game, so was really impressed there. I think the thing going back to the Clemson game for Wake and just talking about your offense, which we know is a juggernaut, is it's one thing to go to double OT and lose to Clemson, and everybody's like, oh, Clemson scored 51 points, but Clemson's defense doesn't give up 38 in regulation usually. So that was a heck of an effort and just shows how good Wake's offense is. I mean, let me ask you, and you seem super knowledgeable, so I think some reporters wouldn't be able to answer this question, but you probably will. What's kind of, everybody runs RPO, but the way Wake does it with that slow mesh and just holding back there, it's so unique. And to me, I think the unsung heroes of the Wake offense are the offensive line. Like how people don't get back there and blow that up is beyond me. So talk a little bit to the like origins of that offense and why it's so doggone difficult to stop.
Yeah, so the slow mesh, the first thing you have to realize is it gets talked about so much on TV, and like that's become the defining, uh it's the theme. It's what everybody wants to say Wake runs. Depending on the opponent and depending on how they're defended, they might run slow mesh like less than 20% of their snaps.
Yeah.
It's really very selective when Wake uses it. Now, depending on some of the defensive looks, they'll run it, 50% of their RPOs slash options will be
Right.
slow mesh. What slow mesh does is, that RPO where the ball can either be put into the running back's gut for a carry, or the quarterback can pull it and run it, or pull it and throw it. For your Alabamas or everybody else in the country, basically, that runs an RPO, or yeah, runs an RPO, that decision process is like 1 second. It's one beat, and the
Yeah.
slow mesh just elongates it to 2 or 3 seconds. And so you think like, okay, 1 second versus 2 or 3 is not that much of a difference, but in a football play, yeah, it is.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so what the slow mesh does is it'll freeze linebackers and safeties in the middle of the field.
That's
That's the whole goal of it.
the Army game last year. We had two really good safeties. One of them still there, the other one graduated, but that's what they're very, very talented. These kids, Broughton and Cunningham, made big plays against everybody. And the whole game, I saw them just flat footed and getting smoked. And I was like, what is going on?
Yeah, it neutralizes your safeties
Yeah.
so much. And what Wake did against Clemson is they used it. The offensive line, they weren't perfect, but given the Clemson
Given
skill,
Clemson's
given
front four.
yeah,
Yeah.
given what they're gonna do to you up front, given that talent level, they were perfect. Like the offensive line, the tight ends, and the running backs that were in the game, they were perfect. They did everything and more that you could have asked them to do, and so that allowed Sam Hartman to get a half second to a second longer in protection. And Clemson had a lot of faith in corners that are not as good as the corners they've had in the past. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that they were down 2 corners to start with, so they're already playing some backup guys, some inexperienced guys, true freshmen out there. And where Wake is a developmental program across the board,
Yeah.
where you can look, if you look at one position and say, man, they are really killing it with how they're developing players, it's receiver, and it's
Yeah.
specifically wide receiver. Like, they've got three that I think would probably start for just about everybody in the ACC. With A.T. Perry, had a big game against Army
Terry's
last
a
year.
beast. Yeah, that guy scares me.
You guys didn't see Donovan Green last year because he was out. He tore his ACL last summer. He's
Okay.
back. He's 6'2", so he's not as big as Perry, but he is thick. I've said he's a fourth year guy who has looked the part of a college wide receiver since day one. Like, he is
Wow.
that fit. he's got that physique. He was a 4-star. I can't remember which he signed with another 4-star, but one of them dropped to 3-star in the last update that Rivals did in their signing class. So I can't remember if he's the one that slipped or if he's the one that
but he's right there either way. Yeah.
Yeah. He's great. And then the newest one they've got is a 3rd-year guy, Jamal Banks, who was a basketball player. And he was getting some low to mid-major offers in basketball, and went to a football academy basically in Baltimore for his last semester of high school, and that really prepared him to be an ACC receiver.
Okay.
So he's kind of blown up on the scene this year. He leads Wake with 5 touchdown catches. I think AT, Donovan, and Keyshawn, the tight end Blake Whiteheart all have 3 apiece. Sam Hartman missed a game and he's still got 15 touchdowns in 4 games
to 2 interceptions. That's a pretty good ratio. Coach Monken, and that's, I can't have an interview talking about Wake Forest and not talk about Sam Hartman. I know Jeff Monken said last year that was the best athlete he's ever seen in Mikey Stadium, which is saying something. So hey man, it wouldn't be, I live in Georgia, so we're good. It wouldn't be an interview between 2 Southerners if you didn't have some dogs coming through. It's good stuff. So
yeah, man, I don't even know what's out there right now.
Right. So I mean, in your opinion, what makes Sam Hartman so effective?
Sam, he's not as a crazy athlete like you would see CJ Stroud or Bryce Young. I don't think I'm disrespecting by saying that.
No.
What makes Sam so good is probably, it's probably going to sound pretty corny, and it's especially going to sound pretty corny when I'm talking about playing Army, but he is courageous. Like, if you're playing in Wake's offense, you're going to take hits. Like, on that RPO, when you're handing the ball to the back and there's a backside guy coming, he's either going to hit you or the back. And if it's a good fake, he's hitting you. So he's taken so many shots. He's just, he fits all those cliches. He's a gutty football player. He has had moments where, he has failed in big moments for Wake, like the bowl game in 2020 against Wisconsin. He was not good. The ACC championship game in the same stadium last year, he wasn't good. But other times, like on the road at Florida State, when you're coming off what Dave Clawson called a soul-crushing loss the week before, he's making plays as you're chewing 7 minutes off the clock in the 4th quarter to go down and clinch the game. Last year's game against Army, I mean, if Wake's offense had 10 full possessions and they needed to score 9 touchdowns, if they scored 8 touchdowns on 10 possessions,
like on 1 possession, they probably would have lost.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like, as bad as Wake's defense was that day, that's how good Wake's offense was, and they had to be that good. The game against Louisville last year, I might have mentioned that. The game against NC State last year that really gave them breathing room to win the Atlantic Division, Sam was not at his best. He told us after the game he thought he missed a lot of throws, but he still wound up with 3 touchdowns and somewhere around 300 yards. He's just, like I said, he is a gutty football player. I don't know if anybody is going to look at him and say, man, that's the number 1 overall pick. That guy has to be starting from day 1 in the NFL. That's not in the cards, but he is such a heady, such a savvy football player that it's fun to watch that development over the last 5 seasons.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up another point. You talked about development and how Wake Forest and Coach Clawson really are one of the top developmental programs in the country. I mean, you guys don't have a ton of transfers like a lot of other schools that I've seen. You guys recruit kids, develop them, and they get better. So what do you think about Coach Clawson's system and maybe, the assistants, the strength and conditioning crew? What is it that allows Wake to do such a good job developing players? Is it the type of kids they recruit, being kind of a, like Army, a higher level academic institution a little bit, kind of some of that stuff?
Yeah, it's all in that mixed bag of recruiting. Like they're not gonna dabble in the Clawson always tells us on signing day they're not in very many hat games. Like there's not many kids that they'll sign that are sitting up there with 5 hats on a table spread out and
Right.
guessing whether the Wake one is going to be the pick or not.
Yeah.
They get kids committed fairly early. Like there always feels like a moment in June when Wake has a top 15 recruiting class and the fan base kind of gets worked up into a lather, but
Yeah.
it's because they're at 15 recruits while a lot of other schools up there with them have 5 recruits.
Right.
It's all going to even out once the other schools pick up the kids that like to commit a little later in the process. And yeah, you're right. It is they recruit the Clawson always likes to tell us that it's a not only a big deal to get the kid into school, it's a big deal to make sure they can survive school. Like they
Yeah.
don't want to take kids that are drowning with coursework because that's going to bleed into preparation for games and it's going to bleed into their mental state when they're trying to play football.
Right.
So yeah, it's very formulaic how they recruit and where they target and obviously they're recruiting skill, they're evaluating skill. A big piece of the developmental pie kind of is when you look specifically at Wake's offense, they've got almost the same offensive staff since Dave Clawson has been at Wake Forest, and it's his 9th season at Wake. Offensive coordinator, the running backs coach, the O-line coach, and the receivers coach all are on their 9th seasons at Wake.
Wow.
The tight ends
That's
coach is on
super unusual, especially in today's college football environment.
Yeah, and the tight ends coach, he's the new one of the group, and I can't remember if it's 6th or 7th year with them.
Wow.
So that's one of the things that that always surprises people because it's not something that gets brought up very often.
Yeah.
But that continuity, that staff continuity, it plays such a huge factor. And then you look at Wake's defense; they've had a defensive line coach who came to Wake when Dave Clawson got to Wake, Dave Cohen. Every other defensive line, coaching position has turned over, I think 2 or 3 times now at this point. Like Dave is on his 4th defensive coordinator in 9 years. Yeah, off the top of my head, I would say they're on at least their 2nd or 3rd position coach at every defensive position other than defensive line.
Other than D-line. Okay.
Yep.
Good stuff. And kind of my last question for you, Conor. We talked a lot about Dave Clawson. The guy has had tremendous success at a place that's not super easy to win at in a really tough division. Wake is a Power 5 school, no doubt about it, ACC power, but they're a small school. And I'm sure Dave's had offers out there. Is there any concern among the Wake Forest fan base that he might go take a really quote unquote big time job, or is he super happy at Wake and plan to stay there for a while?
Yeah, so I think there is a very small number of schools that if they came open that Wake fans should be concerned. John Curry should be, have that list that all ADs have of this is my wish list if my coach moves on.
Right.
Keep that handy, but none of the 5 openings right now fit that bill. I mean, Dave has talked a lot about his year at Tennessee as the offensive coordinator. I would not think Dave wants to go to a place where he's going to be. I'm borrowing this from I think an Andy Staples column that I saw today. He does not want to be in a fishbowl job. Like he does not want to go somewhere where it's like Wisconsin is a big college town. He does not want to go to Madison and not be able to go out to dinner and just have a nice family. Like Bo here, he or like me and Bo is distracting me with his that year at Tennessee, he hated the fact that he could not live a normal life in
Mhm.
Knoxville. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, the jobs that would come open, I you always think of private and academic focus because that's what every job of Dave's has been, other than the Tennessee offensive
Right.
coordinator experiment, like Richmond, Fordham, Bowling Green. I would keep an eye on if Notre Dame came open,
Mm.
if Stanford came open,
Mhm.
maybe Northwestern, Michigan on a little bit of a smaller scale. I mean, I don't know of anybody that goes to Ann Arbor and lives a low profile life if you're
Yeah,
the
I
head
was gonna
football
say
coach.
that's a huge that's a very small fishbowl.
Yeah. So, and Notre Dame for that matter, like
Yeah, that's true.
it's
You're not flying under the radar at Notre Dame, so
yeah, so that's where you get into, I mean, Wake Forest fits a lot of what Dave likes.
yeah.
It's I always say like I'm a big golf fan, so I see guys that I've cheered for going to live golf. Like everybody has their price.
Yeah, right.
Um, like we're
I know. Don't get me started on that. It's not my favorite topic of conversation.
but but yeah, I mean, it's everybody is loyal until you name a number
Right.
that suits them. So
Exactly.
if in 2 months Dave took another job, then I would be pretty surprised. But at this point, nothing would shock me. Maybe
Right.
I'm just numb to it. Maybe I'm cynical, but that's kind of my
Yeah.
view of it.
I completely understand, Connor. Anything for me? Anything you want to know about Army prior to game time?
Yeah. Offensively, looking at the game by game, like they throw for 300 yards against UTSA, and they've completed one pass since then. Is that how they were being defended, or is that you know
Yeah,
going?
it's Brent Davis, the OC, is a big believer in it. I mean, it just makes sense. Take what the defense gives you, right? I mean, they'd way rather run the ball. They'd way rather do what they did the last 2 weeks than do what they had to do against UTSA and Coastal. But UTSA, I mean, people talk about 8 men in the box. UTSA had 10 men in the box most of the game. I mean, they did not care. They were like, we are going to stop the fullback. Like you said, kind of with Wake's plan against Clemson. If DJ beats us over the top, and I think that's what they said. If Army's going to beat us throwing the ball, then fine. Tip your hat to them, win. And Cade Ballard, we have a 2 quarterback rotation, Tyler and Ballard. Tyler's definitely the better runner. Tyler's improved in his passing game a lot, but Ballard's definitely the better thrower of the football. And he just threw the ball all over the yard against UTSA. We had guys wide open, slot back, streaking down the field with nobody within 30 yards of them. So that helped. And then against Villanova, they played a little softer, maybe like a 3-3 or 3-4 a lot of the game. And so, you don't put 8-9 guys in the box, we're going to drill you all day long. That's what happened. And then last week against Georgia State, there were a couple passing opportunities. I think we were 1 for 8 or 1 for 9
Yeah,
throwing the ball. It was Ballard's worst game I've seen him play. He did not throw the ball well for whatever reason. Instead of the slots on play action, who are usually wide open, streaking down the field, we tried to get the ball to our receiver, Alston, a lot, and he just couldn't get open. Alston made a couple big catches in the Wake game last year, 1-on-1. The
he
kid's
made
talented,
big
but we
catches
just couldn't get
against
him
an
the ball.
NFL corner.
Yeah,
Like that was the thing that I think it was brought up by Dave Clawson in his press conference. I mean, Jasir Taylor is on the Chargers roster, and he's in some pictures from that game where he's getting the ball snatched over his head. That was shocking in that game. So it's interesting to hear that Isaiah Austin can't make those same plays now
Yeah, it
against.
was. Some of the balls Ballard threw him weren't great. I mean, yeah, because you give Alston a 1-on-1 ball, he's going to get it 80-90% of the time, I think. So, as you said, against an NFL corner, that's pretty solid. So, I think, if Wake and Coach Lambert, load up to stop the run, which I'm sure they will, you're probably going to see Army throw the ball 9 or 10 times and see what happens.
Gotcha.
Play action would be the most effective for sure. I'm not a fan of when they did a couple 3-step drops with Tyler. The kid's listed at 5'8", but honestly, he's probably 5'6", 5'7" in spikes. And guys are just jumping up, batting the ball down. So I think for Army to be effective, it's got to be play action, and it's the slots have a better shot unless they can get Alston 1-on-1. But yeah, so that's what I see happening Saturday probably.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
sounds good. That's
cool.
That was my confusion looking at the box scores and kind of comparing.
Yeah, you look at the stat lines and it's like, wait, what happened there? I mean, we were number 1 in the nation in pass efficiency after the first 2 games, and then which is hilarious. Yeah, I mean, I think Monken's thing is when we've got to throw the ball, we'll throw it. We'd rather not, but if that's what we got to do to win, then so be it. Most teams that force Army to throw the ball are typically going to beat us. If the fullback's not rolling, it makes everything tougher.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. So that's about it. So before I let you go, Conor, I got to get a prediction out of you.
Oh boy. Can I get away with saying there won't be 126 points scored unless they shift it over to the Joel
fair.
And start playing basketball?
Yeah, exactly.
I think Wake wins. I think it's not as close as last year. I do think Army gets some things going on the ground. I was impressed, a couple people on the Wake side of things brought up the fact that this is Army's only P5 game. And
yeah,
they've played P5 teams really close the last 3 or 4 years. And they beat, was it Missouri last year in the bowl game?
Beat Mizzou in the bowl game. Yeah.
Lost to West Virginia by 3 the year before in a bowl.
Yeah. Lost to Wisconsin by 7 at Camp Randall.
Yep, and then the Oklahoma and Michigan games went to overtime. Yeah.
No, our kids get fired up for the P5 games for sure. And I think, I wrote my weekly pregame article and I said, look, I think Wake's going to win, but I think whenever I've counted Jeff Monken's teams out and been like, they're just going to get smoked this week, that's when they're the most dangerous, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know how healthy they are. That's been a problem too. There's been a lot of injuries this year. But if they're relatively healthy, I think Wake's going to get their best punch. I'll say that. So
that in mind, I'll say Wake 38, Army 21.
Yeah, I think that's probably about where I'm landing. I think that's a pretty good pick. So, Conor, last thing before we go, let folks know where they can find your stuff, your articles, your interviews, everything else you're doing with Rivals, and maybe outside of that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so wakeforest.rivals.com is Deacons Illustrated. Got football and basketball stuff there for everybody. Also cover Duke. That's duke.rivals.com. Not sure. No, Duke and Army have played semi-recently, but I'm not sure if they're on the schedule.
We used to play them pretty regularly in football, and of course, a lot of West Point grads are Duke basketball fans because of Coach K. But now that he's retired, we'll have to see how that goes.
Gotcha.
All right. Well, thank you, Conor. Have a great night. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. And Bo, I guess, says thanks too.
Thanks to Bo too. All right. See ya.